California officials are investigating whether Florida Governor Ron DeSantis was behind flights of asylum seekers from the Texas border to California's capital. A second plane load of migrants on a private charter flight arrived in Sacramento yesterday. Another group arrived at a different airport in Sacramento, but on the same plane Friday. California's Attorney General says Florida taxpayers paid the same company to fly migrants to Martha's Vineyard in September. DeSantis hasn't said anything about these latest flights. In a tweet, California Governor Gavin Newsom called DeSantis a small, pathetic man and hinted the state could pursue kidnapping charges. Alan ORR Jr. joins us. He's the founder of the ORR Immigration Law Firm and is the past president of the American Immigration Lawyers Association. Good afternoon to you and welcome. Let me begin by asking you, could kidnapping charges be filed here, and who would be charged?
So there are many charges, kidnapping being one of them that could be charged here, because apparently these individuals didn't know where they were going and they were misled into where they were going and held captive by people who picked them at the border. One thing that is unique about the California situation is that they picked adults and mostly men to move to California, which is different than the flights that went to Martha's Vineyard that included kids, because moving international kids is an international crime. So there's a lot to be seen. And we need to look under this to also look for conspiracy charges with regards to if they all work together to mislead these individuals, meaning the airlines, the Texas, whoever's funding it and whoever's paying the bills from Florida, as well as people who worked to get them to El Paso, to get them to New Mexico, to then get them to California. So there's a chain of custody here.
Wow. California officials said the migrants were given a false promise, pretty much, of jobs. What's the law regarding that?
So that's also against the law to that's exactly what we call harboring, in which we would say any employer would have to do a federal fine for that. But we're not looking at federal charges right now because we're not seeing what the federal government is doing in this case, because they also didn't actually move into the busing cases. But this is a little bit different than the busings because the individuals supposedly knew where they were going in the busing cases. Someone said, do you want a trip to New York? Do you want a trip to these other places? And they signed up for those trips. The difference here is that they said that someone was going to offer them a job. So they misled them into being captive and then leading to a place where there were no jobs. And this is exactly what we also happened in the Massachusetts case, in which now there is a Texas sheriff who's looking at bringing charges against many individuals. So I think what the charges could lead from, the carrier charges, of course, is severe, as well as the people who attracted them to the flights is severe, as well as those people who are paying them, right? So many people in the former story from Massachusetts, we understood that there was a woman who was working for someone in Florida who led these individuals to get on this flight to Martha's Vineyard.
Sort through this a little more. You mentioned a county sheriff in Texas is recommending prosecutors file criminal charges in the Martha's Vineyard flight. But didn't he indicate who would be charged, who would be held responsible there? Can you go into any more specifics with that?
So I think it's a little bit difficult at this point where they're doing the early stages to say exactly how far it will get and if it will get back to the governor. Who we know definitely could be charged are the carrying companies, the individuals who actually brought on the flights and the individuals who led them to get on those flights. Any individuals that signed any documents or took any documents from these individuals can also be charged because that's part of the conspiracy. With the conspiracy charge, what you must also understand in the law is that you don't have to understand exactly what happened. You just have to be involved in the conspiracy. So anyone who transferred money from Florida to this airline company to move these individuals may also receive charges. And so the charges go pretty deep if you get them on the conspiracy charge as well as the kidnapping charges, because it's a chain of custody as well as the money that went into doing this. So if there were gas that was brought, food that was brought, people who were servicing the plane, people who are doing translation. So there's a large field of people that they can charge. And one of the things that I think both the state of Texas, the county of Texas and the state of California don't want to do is to put people on notice necessarily of who they're going to charge. But I think if they're doing the appropriate thing, they would charge everyone.
Do Florida taxpayers have any legal recourse if they oppose funding flights like this?
It is unfortunate that the Florida taxpayers now, I don't know what the recall is for the people who actually voted on the local level to actually have the money funded to do this sort of thing. But I think they do. They may have a charge in that these individuals weren't in Florida. So I think the local government passed a bill that gave DeSantis this funding to do this. I don't remember if the funding specifically said the individuals had to be in Florida, because in this case, these individuals who went to Martha's Vineyard and who went to California were never in the state of Florida.
California was not the migrants' intended destination, right? So how does this complicate this whole asylum process?
So it cost them time. So each of these individuals had already been processed by the federal government. So they were actually in the government and they had court dates that were going to take place in Texas. Now that they've been moved to California, those dates are going to have to be reassigned and those individuals will have to be recontacted. So therefore, it just makes the system more complicated to individuals who are already in a vulnerable situation. So therefore, that is why the weaponization of this humanitarian issue is really bad for not just only the country, but also for these individuals, because it creates court clogs. So now the immigration, the federal courts, which are already backlogged close to 1.5 million cases, is now going to have to reassign these cases and find these individuals to change them in the system. And what we're seeing here is that in both cases, it was not, thousands. It was just 50 so far, around 50 in California and around 100 in Massachusetts. So is Ron DeSantis really making that big of a shift in the government with such a small number, or is it just a political tool to sort of weaponize people? I think it's the latter.
Alan Orr Jr. of the ORR Immigration Law Firm, thank you so much for joining us and giving us that valuable insight.